So it's been a few months since I last filmed, and it was Halloween yesterday, so we're going to try to do this despite the creaky voice and the tiredness. Hello, my name is Sunny, and this is Clickbait, where I use my digital humanities and public culture background as well as my personal experiences working and exploring the digital space to talk about more conscientious digital use and so that we can navigate the space more self-awarely. Today we're going to talk specifically about a very hot topic. Let's talk about political polarization, or our tendency to break into factions, or our tendency to believe something so much that everyone else basically becomes the enemy, and it's usually kind of like a black or white thing. It's if you're not on this side, you're on this side. So let's talk about that and how social interfaces basically makes it worse. Specifically, we'll talk about it in context with some of the stuff that we learned from the Cambridge Analytica scandal. So the Cambridge Analytica people were basically the firm that helped Trump win the elections. That's what they're known for Trump, but they admitted that they actually did trial runs throughout several political elections and campaigns throughout the world leading up to Trump, actually including the winning of President Duterte. So basically what Cambridge Analytica admitted to doing was harvesting data from people, from their social media use, from their website use, in order to give them ads that were targeted that would help change their minds. They didn't need to do it for a huge amount of people. They specifically, again, used data to be able to pinpoint who were the people who would change their minds, and these very few people, they counted the exact number of percentage of the people that they needed to flip so that Clinton would lose and Trump would win. And they gave these people very targeted ads according to their use. They made it so that if they kind of gravitated towards a certain rhetoric, that they would hear that. If they kind of were very visual people, they gave them more that through their social media use, right? You would see like the ads on the side or your suggested videos on YouTube. And you know, it worked. Trump lost the popular vote, but then won by a very small majority. So yeah, that's what Cambridge Analytica did. In a social research class that I did, we specifically talked about the idea of homophily. Now, if you Google homophily, it's one of the first definitions that comes out is your ability to form deep connections with people who kind of have the same interests and have many similarities to you. But specifically in kind of the social media context, when we talk about homophily, we talk about how we form networks with people who already believe the same things as us. And in that way, we become extremely isolated from people or networks that don't believe the same thing as us. If you can imagine it, it means that, for example, the people who believe in Team A and the people who believe in Team B. So you have both in your circle of 1,000 friends on Facebook. You would think that your network would look like you in the middle, and then your nodes would kind of like intersect between everybody, right? But what it actually looks like is whatever you believe in, if you believe more in A or you believe more in B, then your interactions tend to kind of flow that way. And then this, while they're connected to you through friendship or something, you don't actually see much of their content, and likewise they see less and less of your content. Why? First, because of choice, because of course you tend to interact with people who believe what you believe, who confirm your existing biases, whether their bias is based on logic or emotion, and B, because of algorithms, because the algorithm says like, oh, you know what makes you use social media more? When you interact with the people who believe the same thing as you, or when you see more of the stuff that you believe in. So of course they'll keep feeding you that stuff, and they'll feed you less of the stuff that you don't like or that you don't believe in. And in that way, these two networks begin to form kind of very separate rhetorics, and then that's how people just begin to throw the same insults and stones at each other, because they begin to have very different sources. They have they receive very different information, very different narratives, very different perspectives, and so there's no meeting in between because of this homophily phenomena that happens. That is the problem, that big tech companies will bend over backwards in order to feed you more of the same thing that you like, instead of actively trying to widen your perception. Unless you really go out of your way. Even if you do go out of your way, which is something that I do, for example, I obviously am not for the Marcoses, who are a political family in the Philippines. I hate the Marcoses, but I went out of my way to join pro-Marcos groups to see what people were saying, how they said it. I originally did this for a research project in university, but then I just stayed in there. And if not for me being part of these groups, I would never see the pro-Marcos stuff, because everybody in my circle that speaks loudly or that gets fed to me is anti-Marcos. And at this point, let's admit it, if I tried and piped up in these groups and said, you know what, I don't necessarily believe in him. Maybe you guys could try my sources and see why you should vote for somebody else. Of course, they would just remove me from the platform. So then it goes both ways, right? If you go to their profiles outside the group, you can see that everybody in their comments are all pro Marcos. And they do the same thing, right? They can't believe that the other side would believe in the other person. So it doesn't really go anywhere. It's not to say nobody does it. Of course, I have a lot of friends who really got out of the way and try to be respectful. But for every one person who does that, there's like 300 other people who are just like, yeah, you believe that thing? I can't believe you, you piece of shit. So people find the idea of free speech attractive. On a class that I took about American media specifically, my professor did say that if a country feels like free speech is constitutionally protected, then they value it all the more and will really, really fight to protect it in ways that distort the meaning of free speech. Since it becomes constitutionally connected, they also begin to see communication as kind of like a political responsibility, as patriotism. Like, if I don't have free speech, I can't fully be like the best American that I can be in this example. Because you become immersed in a place where it's full of yes people, because you're immersed in a place where everybody is kind of agreeing and saying the same things as you, confirmation bias will lead you to believe that, oh, the other side is always cheating, the other side is always peddling fake news, the other side must be stupid. Yeah, and another thing that prevents people from meeting in the middle. And because you see so many things, it goes from I read something that is true to I read it, so it must be true. It becomes that, because then you trust your sources so much already, because it's all that you ever see, and because they're trusted by people that you like. Fucked up. And yeah, Cambridge Analytica, companies actively abuse that. They actively use that as strategy. They know that people don't, once they begin to lean one way, they'll just see more of that thing. So people like the Marcoses who want to win, who want to rewrite public history, won't try to change my mind. They won't try to change the minds of majority of people on my friends list. It's the ones who aren't necessarily decided, they'll go for them because they're more likely to believe in these things. It works to the advantage of people who have the money to be able to manipulate these systems. It goes around and around and around, and none of us ever really talk about it, and it really sucks that this is kind of the future of communication and campaigning online. So, friendly tip for today, and I like the way I phrase it, so I'll just read it. It's hard to disabuse people of the things that they believe most strongly in. But the most effective form of political conversion remains personal interactions. You're still more likely to get somewhere conversing with someone face to face. Even if you don't go anywhere, it's still, you're also more likely to understand their perspectives, and it gives you weaponry in a way to be able to speak to somebody again after that. Yeah, talking to people online will not change their opinions. Even if you make fun of the source that they came up with, even if they're blatantly believing in false things and you point out why it's false, they'll always have tons of people on their end saying why it isn't false, or at least why it doesn't matter that it's false. The online battleground is a very weird place. It's not necessarily representative of real life because there are paid trolls, again, on both sides, I'll be fair. There is validity to still debating online, of course, but you have to know that that's more for kind of like propping up your side. In case somebody undecided politically comes across and sees the facts. That's less for the benefit of the person that you're trying to engage or reply to, because that person is quite unlikely to change their minds. Unless the thing in real life that really influences them, for example, their parents or their teachers or their coworkers, or a personal experience that they're having, unless that is the thing that makes them flip over to the other side, you're really unlikely to do anything. And you shouldn't feel bad about that. That's the way it is, because they wouldn't be able to change your minds no matter how hard they try as well. So there'll be a part 2 to this video. I've already talked a lot, but yeah, I'll see you in a bit for the next video, where we will be talking about source selectivity, which we already kind of dived into in this video. Thanks for listening, vote wisely, and see you then.